So this presentation is about JavaScript and why we shouldn't try to fake classes in JavaScript. So I'm a developer and obviously I used to code a lot with classes. I use a lot like the class design pattern. So the first time that I bumped into JavaScript, I had this problem. JavaScript actually doesn't have classes, doesn't allow you to use classes. So that was a problem. And I was like, okay, no, what I can do now? The first idea that I had at the time was, okay, let's try to have a look. Maybe someone else have my same problem and try some workaround. So I look it up, and all these start to came up in my browser, and I was like, why have to be so hard to do something that I do with the traditional language like Java, Ruby in JavaScript? So the problem was this one. I was in my comfort zone, and basically like the temptation like to use all the knowledge that I had, like using classes with JavaScript was very strong. So the problem is like that if you want to be like a very good web developer, you need to understand actually how JavaScript works and embrace it. So what's this presentation about? What's this talk about? The first things that we are gonna see is the JavaScript prototype chain, actually how it works. After we have a look, we will have a look like how people like implement pseudo classes in JavaScript using. We are gonna see the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript, and last uh, we we will have a look at alternative patterns to to work with JavaScript. So let's start with the prototype chain. So almost everything in JavaScript is an object. And what are objects in JavaScript? Basically, are collection of key-value pairs, and you can declare an object in JavaScript with a literal or a constructed form, and every object have a prototype. So the literal form is the one that is the easiest one, the one that everybody knows. So for example, here I'm just like declaring an object car with a property color equal to red, and the interesting bit here is that JavaScript is actually like creating an object, but it's also like automatically linking this object internally to object.prototype. What is object.prototype? Is basically an object that contains all the built-in method in JavaScript. So for example, the method to string. When I say built-in method, I mean all the method that every object can use. So the other way is the constructed form. And here things start to get a little bit complicated. Because the first time that I actually saw this code, I was like, oh, okay, easy. Like here, like I'm creating a new instance of object and then call it car. But it's actually not what happened, because object is not a class, because JavaScript doesn't have class. Object here is actually a function, and I'm using object here as a constructor. So basically I obtain the same, but passing like from this constructor object. We have to understand what is a function in JavaScript. In JavaScript, a function is just another object. It's a particular object that can't be callable, and I can treat any function in JavaScript as a normal object. So function can have property, and in particular JavaScript, every time that I create a new function, it's gonna set for me a property prototype with just an empty object. What is a constructor? Basically, a constructor can be any function in JavaScript. So, for example, here I'm creating a function vehicle, and let's say that I want to use this function vehicle as a constructor. What I can do, I just basically call this function with the new operator before. So I'm using here vehicle as a constructor. Once that we understand that, what actually happens when I'm calling a constructor? So 4 things happen. The first one is that JavaScript creates an object. In this case, I'm creating my vehicle. The second thing that is set the constructor property for this object that I'm creating to the constructor vehicle. The third thing that is the important part to understand how the prototype chain works is that JavaScript link this new object that I'm creating to vehicle.prototype. So it's creating this link. And last, it calls vehicle in a fashion in the context of the new object. Basically, JavaScript, if you remember before, we had this function vehicle, and inside it was a property this.color equal red. So this, and in this particular case, is gonna become my vehicle. So I'm gonna have something like my vehicle.color equal red. That's why we have also set the property color for the object that I created. And there is also another way to create object in JavaScript with ECMAScript 5, and it's the object.create method. It's very similar to the constructed form, but it's actually simpler because I don't need to pass for I don't need to use a constructor to link to object. So let's say that I want to create an object that is linked to vehicle.prototype. I can just say my vehicle equal object.create vehicle.prototype. JavaScript do all the work for me without using any constructor. So it's actually easy. It's actually easier. So now that we understood how objects work in JavaScript, we can understand actually the prototype chain. So the last element of the prototype chain in JavaScript is almost all the time object.prototype. Here we are creating a shape object with a literal form and a property border, and JavaScript link for me this object to object.prototype. After we are creating a triangle, and we want this triangle linked to shape. Now let's try to retrieve the border of this triangle. What actually JavaScript do? JavaScript is trying to retrieve this property in triangle. It can find it, and it just go up in the prototype chain. It arrive in shape, it find border, and just return the value of border that is gonna be red in this time. Same things if I'm trying to retrieve something that is not actually in the prototype chain. JavaScript look in triangle and go up in the prototype chain till it find null. And when it found null, he understands that there is no such an object in the prototype chain, and it just returns undefined. So that's it. This is how the prototype chain work. Let's try now to understand how people try to fake classes in JavaScript using pseudo classes. Before, I want to speak of a particular aspect of real classes to understand better what's the difference between a class in a traditional language and pseudo classes in JavaScript. So here I have two classes. I'm declaring two classes in Ruby: one class person and one class student that inherit from person. So the things that I want to point out, that classes here are just blueprint container basically that have all the characteristic that contain all the characteristic of how the physical object that I'm gonna create later should have. And for example, here I'm creating an instance of student, and I call it Jamir. And another time, here Jamir is actually a copy of all the characteristics described by the classes. And when I'm calling a method, for example, Jamir.name, Jamir is not gonna try to retrieve this method in another class or in another object. Basically, Jamir have inside itself the instance Jamir, have inside itself all the knowledge to handle like this method. So in JavaScript, obviously we don't have classes, so we have to try like to fake classes using the prototype chain. And one the most used way like to to create pseudo classes in JavaScript is using prototypal inheritance. So let's try actually to understand how prototypal inheritance helping us with mental maps. So the last element of the prototype chain, like I said before, is always object.prototype. Here we are creating a function person, and this function person, like I said before, is gonna have like a prototype property linked to set to an empty object. After we extend the person.prototype object with a method and name in this case, after we create a function student, and when I'm creating a function student, basically I'm doing kind of the same that I did before with person. So this function student is gonna have a property prototype that link to an empty object, and this empty object obviously is gonna link to object.prototype, because I didn't say anything different, so JavaScript automatically link the student.prototype to object.prototype. This is not what we want, because we want to use the prototype chain, so we need the student.prototype link to person.prototype. So we can just replace student.prototype with another object that link to person.prototype. So now we go here and we can just extend the student.prototype with a method getSchool, and now it's all set. I can create Jamir using the function student as a constructor. So, and the most important thing that happen here is that Jamir, the object Jamir that I'm creating, is gonna be linked to student.prototype. That is what we want. There we go. So maybe it can look like inheritance, but it's actually not. Because if you look carefully like at the direction of the arrow, I think at inheritance like something that goes from up to down. Here, like a parent-child relationship. Here, instead, Jamir is if doesn't know something, it try like it say, okay, let's try to see if the element about me know that property or that method. So this is more like delegation. So now that we understood that, we can explore alternative patterns. So the question is, do we really need to fake classes in JavaScript? There are alternatives out there, and one of them is embracing OLOO. And yeah, what is OLOO actually? So OLOO just stands for object linked to other object, and it's a style pattern that you can use to implement delegation-oriented design. And it's also like is always embrace the nature of JavaScript. Is a much simpler and straightforward way to work with JavaScript. And for me, the best part about OLOO is that we can get rid completely of the confusing operator new. New was so confusing for me when I start to learn JavaScript. So this is how OLOO style look like. But let's try to understand this code like we helping us with mental maps another time. So all the time object.prototype, last element of our prototype chain, and here we are actually like creating a person object with a literal form with a couple of methods, and JavaScript is gonna automatically link this object for us to object.prototype. Now we want to create a student object, and for this I want this student object be able to use all the methods that are in person. So how can I do that? I can just like create a student object link to person, and to do that I can definitely use the object.create method. Now we're here, and I can add some specific method for student. In this case I have a method set and a method getSchool. and now all is set. I can create um, for example, like an object jam here, and I want this object jam to be able to use all the student method. And to do so another time we have to reuse like the object.create method. So now we're here, and I can show you that Jammy can use uh, the set method of student to set his property name and his property school. There we go. So this is all. These are object linked to other object. Look how like the mental map, how clean is the mental map compared to the prototypal inheritance one. So finally all clear, maybe. And wrapping up what I learned about all these from all this experience. The faking classes actually have a cost in JavaScript, so introduce another level of complexity and can be avoided definitely, like for example using OLOO. And another thing, that classes are not gods. They are a very good like design pattern, but are optional. And if a language doesn't like implement classes, we shouldn't be like stubborn and try to fake it. You should just embrace the language. Yeah, last but not least, that getting out of our comfort zone is definitely key to learn and to grow. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here.